Sure. It's something that, we had kind of toyed with for months leading up to when we launched, but it started in, I think, isolation when everyone went into lockdown during COVID. I would kind of try and get some alone time in the basement on my computer, and I would do my thing. Sometimes that would be listening to podcasts on YouTube or just random YouTube videos, and that's where I started going down, the Jordan Peterson rabbit hole, and that kind of led to a lot of other similar content creators in that space. And unbeknownst to me, Tanya was kind of doing the same thing on her alone time, and it wasn't until I think one of the uh, one of the lunch times where we were just sitting there, and I think one of us was listening to it, and we kind of realized, oh, you're listening to that as well. And then the conversation slowly started to spin around where Tanya would say, hey, we could do that, because we ended up watching a couple of creators where it was a husband and wife team, just not talking about politics, but talking about issues in Canada, and how the far left was, I would say, having a very negative effect on the nuclear family, on traditional values, and how women were even being demonized, um, being stay-at-home moms. But at some point she just kept saying, hey, well, why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? And it wasn't until the Ontario government announced that they were ceasing funding for the autism program that we said, well, you know what, maybe the time is now to try and do something like this. Maybe we can get monetized in a year, and maybe that'll bring in a little bit of money for our son. So, and then a month later we were monetized. And in terms of the names, why we had names in the first place is because I worked for the federal government at the time, and we had read many stories of people just arbitrarily being dismissed from their positions just because they had the wrong opinion.
Well, and not even in the government. You hear people in the private sector also being dismissed for being conservative or for holding conservative values or saying things that are a little bit more right leaning online. I'm not talking about the extreme stuff. I'm just talking about, you know, just having these traditional conservative values, which we did have. Ryan was the sole income provider in our home. We have and still are a traditional family where Ryan was the main breadwinner, and my job was to stay home and keep the home and raise our son. So it was concerning that possibly we could lose, our source of income through doing Northern Perspective. It was also concerning that could I lose my license as a registered veterinary technician? No idea. I also didn't want to be going to pick my son up at school and getting met with stares and whispers from the other moms because, oh, look at that woman's conservative. So these were all concerns that we had that prompted us to be anonymous.
But when we looked at the the path that Canada was on, where ironically we were going back to demonizing people for the color of their skin, we were demonizing people for their for their gender. um we kind of asked the question, do we want to be 20 years down the road looking back and saying that, you know did we do everything possible to make a better world for our son to grow up in? And if we didn't do anything, we didn't like the answer for that. So all of those reasons kind of culminated into why we started Northern Perspective. And so we started the channel, and we were completely anonymous, save for some two terrible animated, cartoon characters that functioned as us. And we figured, well, we can't just go on there as Ryan and Tanya. So we came up with some monikers. Um, and I think Tanya's is relatively simple. You can explain it.
I just love red foxes. I think they're brilliant.
So there you go.
It's very basic, but
And she had another kind of combo nickname that she had on some of her mobile games that was like that. But for mine, it was more of a dual meaning. One, a cipher it's usually related to encryption, and and code breaking. So in one respect, it was, keeping us secure, keeping us safe, and then in another respect, um, it ended up being a a kind of a metaphor for what we were bringing to the average Canadians in our space, because nobody else was doing that, which is deciphering the government language and bills, and essentially dropping the veil of how government worked and educating Canadians. It was always something that was on my mind, but I never felt, I would say, guilty for what we were doing. It was just, um, when I was at work, I was 100% all in doing what I needed to do for work. My performance reflected that. My employees reflected that. I had a phenomenal team under me at the agency I was at. We completely transformed the IT department into, I would say, one of, if not the top performing IT departments in the category of small department agencies in the federal government, to the point where my boss, the president, nominated me for a security award for accomplishments in IT security, and I ended up being runner up to somebody in the RCMP. And I joke about it and saying, if I'm going to be runner up, I don't mind losing to the RCMP. So, um, but the irony is, when we started covering committee, that's when I think we really started to draw in a unique audience, and we started to gain the attention of even the members of parliament, because they started getting emails from people that they wouldn't otherwise, and they started hearing about these clips, and they started hearing about this channel that was hosting these late night 4 or 5 hour live streams that people were watching as if they were watching a sporting event, to two random people that nobody knows who they are giving accurate color commentary of what's happening in committee. So we really started following the ArriveCan investigation that the Conservatives were bringing at the OGO committee, public accounts, and ethics committees. And we brought so much attention to that, that the government started to get very concerned as to how much um, negative response Canadians were actually providing to them as a result of these contractors double dipping, one hand in the government and one hand into the contracts that they were getting from the government. So in June of 2024, a directive was sent out that all employees had to disclose their side income.
I think it was May, if I can just correct you.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
sorry. It was actually March of 2024 where that directive was out. And put it this way, long story short, I'm no longer working for the government, and I'm still doing Northern Perspectives. So that's that basically tells the story of what happens when when a random government employee is running a podcast. And
Well, and I just want to cut in and say, if I can add that all of the work that we did on Northern Perspective was on our own time. It was always after hours. It was after Vincent went to sleep. So we would start at 9 o'clock at night. Sometimes we wouldn't finish until 11 o'clock or sometimes midnight. And it was done on our own equipment. And none of the information that we were providing was like government secrets or anything that Ryan had learned on the job. It was all things that were readily available to the public that people could go and learn for themselves. We were just finding it and telling the audience about it.
well, and that's something I took very seriously. When I being a public servant, knowing that I was getting paid with taxpayer dollars in some way, shape, or form, I took that very seriously, and I didn't want to take advantage of that at all, because we were literally criticizing the government for misspending taxpayer money, and I wanted to make sure that I was respecting that. So, as I said before, when I was on company time, it had 100% of my effort and 100% of my time. And if I ended up getting a call at 8 or 9 at night, we would stop what we were doing with Northern Perspective, and I was on call, and off we went. And that did happen from time to time. So, um, but it is what it is. we kind of shocked the YouTube community in our space, by appearing on camera as Ryan and Tanya for the first time. And we put out a video with a very important message and powerful message. And up until that point, people were constantly wondering who we were. There was theories that I worked for CSIS. There was theories that I was a lawyer.
There was theories we were both Russian agents. Like, there was all sorts of wild theories because, again, all people saw were these 2 images on the screen and they could hear our voices. And people knew that we were real in some capacity because we had been running live streams and interacting with the audience for a long time. But people didn't know who we were. Who are these people? How do they know all this about government?
So on June 17th, we announced ourselves to the world, if as it were, um, and we were very, very taken aback at the response from the community that we had built up to that point. Because as of June 17th, I no longer worked for the government, and Canadians across the country just they opened their hearts, opened themselves up to us, and we received hundreds, if not thousands, of emails of support, and um, we were constantly getting emotional when those would come in because they were saying to us that you guys have given us so much and we want to give back to you now when you guys need it most. So that was very, very humbling, I would say. And but that let us know that the Canada that everyone thought was gone, it's still there.
It's still there in the people.
And and that's where we knew that we're going to be okay. The first time we met Pierre was in the summer of 2023. So it was after we'd started the podcast, and we met him in a St. Catharines rally, and there was a few things that stuck out to us. Is that number one, he waited until every single person in that room that wanted to meet him got to meet him. So that was the first thing that was surprising to me, because usually, and I wouldn't even blame him. Usually it's okay, you've had your 60 seconds. There's a lot of people, guys. Let's go. Come on, we there's other people online. That didn't happen. Like it was obvious that he told his people, don't rush any of these people. They they've come out here to see me, and I'm going to give them as long as it takes. It's not like he'd said that, but it was obvious in how that portion of the rally was being conducted, that those were the instructions, because no one was rushed, no one was hurried along. They took their pictures, they were able to talk to Pierre. And I always, always, always go back to this story, because we decided that we were going to wait until basically the back of the line, and there was only a few people behind us, so we waited probably hour and a half, 2 hours to see him. And there was a gentleman that was probably 10 people up from us. So we saw him go up and talk to Pierre, and it was this stocky gentleman, older guy, had a hat, um, gray hair, and couldn't see what he was saying to Pierre, but Pierre was just leaning in, listening to him. And then you just saw Pierre, go in and give this guy this bear hug. And I could see Pierre saying, "It's okay. It's gonna be okay." And the guy started, like, because he was crying.
And the thing is, we've told this story a few times on our YouTube channel, and the gentleman actually emailed us, and he sent pictures too, so we knew it was him because I recall exactly what he was wearing. And it's just this amazing story of how we're all connected.
And based on based on that interaction, and then the follow-up interactions that we had and watched, we wanted to see, like, is this really Pierre? Is this really the guy? And nothing changed from interaction to interaction, and everything that we'd observed. Um, so it's a real shame. It's impossible to happen, but I wish every Canadian could have 15 minutes to sit down and talk with Pierre and his wife. If they did, I can't see anyone not voting for him. In many cases, and this is a time period that's one of them, we are not afraid to stand up and speak against what is trending out there, which is people saying the election is rigged and people saying that, it is over for Canada and Canada is dead. And like there's a lot of that going on. But we are pushing back against that, and we're not getting, you know, a ton of views for those types of videos. But for us, that's okay because we can go to sleep at night knowing that we are giving Canadians what they haven't had in years, which is the unfiltered truth.
Right, and the truth matters.
Thanks for watching. If you found it interesting and you liked it, give us a thumbs up. If you're ready to subscribe, click right here. And if you'd like to see another episode, click right here. Tell a friend. Send us comments. Thanks a lot.